Welcome back. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. India has achieved a major milestone in the maritime sector, emerging as the world's leading ship recycling nation, a key target laid out under the Maritime India Vision 2030. Ship recycling volumes have surged from 1.86 million gross tons to nearly 3 million gross tons, aided by a series of policy interventions aimed at strengthening the sector. Amongst the key measures was the launch of the Shipbreaking Credit Note Scheme, under which ship owners receive incentives equivalent to 40% of the scrap value when they buy new vessels built in India. The move has helped boost activity in the recycling ecosystem and strengthen India's maritime ambitions. India has also made significant strides in naval shipbuilding. Recent warships and naval platforms now feature over 75% indigenous content, underscoring the country's push for self-reliance. Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently commissioned 3 new warships, highlighting the growing capabilities of India's defense shipyards. However, India's success in recycling and naval construction stands in contrast to its limited presence in commercial shipbuilding. The country currently accounts for just 0.07% of global commercial ship production. In comparison, China, South Korea and Japan together dominate the sector, accounting for nearly 95% of the world's commercial shipbuilding output. With the global commercial shipbuilding market estimated to be worth between $165 and $175 billion, expanding India's footprint in this space remains one of the biggest challenges and opportunities for the country's maritime ambitions. Let's take a look now at India's share in ship recycling. In fact, let's give you these details, of course, before we throw it open to our guests who are also with us. In fact, well, we are number 1 in ship recycling, as we of course informed you earlier. We are number 1 in ship recycling. Our share, of course, in 2024 was 30.4%. It's of course gone up to 35.4% now. That's up 60%. 1.86 million gigatons is what it was earlier. Now, of course, it's up to 2.99 million gigatons. We're number 15 in ship recycling. In fact, if we talk about, of course, the statistics, this is where things stand. 53%, of course, China's share. India is about 0.07%. So we have got a lot of potential there. You can, of course, see how Norway, Netherlands, Turkey, Indonesia, Russia, Finland, France, Germany, Philippines, Italy, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea above us in those rankings. All right, well, let me in fact join our guests as well, who are in fact with us live now for their perspectives on this big story. We have Captain Sanjay Karve live with us, a former Navy officer. Commander Bhushan Diwan, a former Navy officer, also joins us live. Commodore Anil Jay Singh, a Vice President, Indian Maritime Foundation, is live with us. Yogendra Kapoor also is joining the broadcast, senior economist. Let me make a start with you first, Captain Karve. On, of course, what you make of this big news that is coming in India, of course, making its own naval ships. A lot of, there is a lot of scope, a lot of potential still left to expand it further. But certainly in the last 2 years, we've seen huge strides in our indigenous capacity, isn't it, Captain Karve? What has led to this change?
Yeah, I agree with you. One is this Made in India or Make in India program. But if you look at the naval vessels for last 20 to 25 years, India has been generally self-reliant when it comes to warships. We have been designing and manufacturing our own warships. What is worrisome is our contribution to the world merchant marine. We hardly produce any ships which sail the high seas, other than maybe a few for the shipping corporation and some smaller ships for foreign companies. Gloating over the fact that yes, India is practically self-reliant as far as the Indian Navy is concerned, does not hide our failure when it comes to manufacturing ships or producing ships for the merchant marine. One of the primary reasons is the government had not paid adequate thrust on manufacturing of the merchant vessels. You require a huge amount of capital outlay. You require a well-advanced infrastructure. You require a skilled workforce. And you also require partnership with other nations who have got high technology. The basic hindrance up till now was how much percentage would they be allowed? What is the stake that they would be allowed? Till about few years ago, we had a very restrictive regime of not more than 10%, not more than 15% stake. So, which was a deterrent to most of these major shipbuilders. The second problem which we had was our slow pace. Even for the naval vessels, if you look at it very objectively, the date which the dockyard gives you that the ship will be ready and the actual date when the ship has got commissioned, there is a vast difference. You know, when it comes to the Ministry of Defense on the Indian Navy, the money is going from one pocket to another. It really doesn't make a big hue and cry. But a private company buying a merchant vessel who's spending millions of dollars is not going to accept such delays. He wants the ship to be delivered on time because for him it means loss. He cannot use that ship. So that is one of the major problems that India is today facing. And the present government fortunately has realized this and they have close to 20,000 crores have been earmarked just for shipbuilding development. And when I say shipbuilding development means towards the merchant marine. And this is in the overall strength of 20,000, 200,000 crores which they want to spend on the shipbuilding aspect or connected infrastructure per se. We have to use, people have started competing, people have started using global tech partners, which is the right step forward. So my personal take on this is we got a lot to do when it comes to manufacturing of ships for the merchant navy. Yes, when it comes to ship recycling, we are number one. We are contributing a huge amount of money. Out of 183 shipmaking units in Alang, close to 150 have that Hong Kong Convention's approval. That means we meet the world standards when it comes to that. But when it comes to manufacturing ships for our merchant marine, we got a lot of pace to catch up. We are still way behind the rest of the world.
Absolutely. There is still a lot of potential, as I said earlier, number 15 in shipbuilding, but number 1 now in ship recycling. Commander Diwan, bringing you in here as well now, because the fact, of course, is very clearly that there have been huge strides made after this big Atmanirbhar push by Prime Minister Modi. And it showed, with these ships getting commissioned at the frequency that they are, and with a lot of indigenous components as well. Commander Diwan, is this something now that is an example for the world as well, for them also to send their vessels for recycling if needed in India and also potentially to be built to in the future?
It is a very promising market, but I think still we are rather far away from it because 75% of indigenous content in terms of naval warships is one part of the story.
Yes.
But fitment of so much of equipment, sensors, radars, sonars, weapon systems, electronic warfare, and control systems, that is still, a lot of these things are still, we are getting from overseas. It takes time for us to grow to that stature. But having said that, unless bold targets are, ambitions are articulated, we will not reach those levels which we have the potential to reach because, such a huge EEZ, if India has to become a major maritime power exploiting our EEZ is 2/3 of our land area. 11,000 kilometers is the coastline of ours. And if in the Indian Ocean, in the IOR, in fact, right from Africa on the west to Australia on the east, if we are not dominant in every aspect of maritime presence, manufacturing activity and repairing activity, sailing and, our presence, like as you rightly, China is number 1 today in ship manufacture. And time comes when, even 95% of our goods, trade traffic is on foreign flag vessels. Why? Now, of course, another thing, transshipment ports. For example, now we're coming up with already Vizhingham has come and Great Nicobar will take some time to happen. That is already approved. So I think it's a huge ecosystem. And in this MI, Sagarmala was a port developed focus development. MIV is total overall maritime development focus, I think along the way it has proved, I mean, we need to understand Alang is really, like full India, the geography of India, full Indian Ocean is at, right in the, right at the feet of India. Similarly, Alang is in that sense, geographically a very high point, 10-meter high tides and a gently sloping beach. So coming to ship breaking, why Alang is so suitable? Because, even a heavy ship which has to be recycled and broken can be beached while in high tide. And when the water recedes, ship gently sits on the coastal bed, and the seabed. And the seabed in Alang is hard enough to permit work on that. Start dismantling, start cutting section by section, and it employs almost 5 lakh people if you consider direct employment and unemployment, and direct employment, indirect employment. Direct about 40,000 workers are there. Then there are ancillary industries, recycling the engines, recycling even furniture, transportation, and the hinterland is there. Gujarat, industrially advanced province state. Maharashtra, industrially advanced state. So 3 million tons steel we are able to recover from this ship breaking activity. And that is in the value chain. I think ship breaking is the first step. And thereafter, we go forward to shipbuilding, ship repair, and commissioning merchant ships. So I think I must share with you that India's GDP of $4.5 trillion, 13 to 14% are the logistic costs. And with China has about 9% logistic costs. America has 7 to 8%. 1% of logistic cost reduces by better ports, a lot of infusion of AI, health and safety standards, and the whole works. And a large number of ports, if 1% means it's like one person means $45 billion we are saving. And so 13% logistic costs, if they reduce to 9%, that is a vision in 5 years. So we are saving $225 billion. Let's understand the scale. Our oil import, for which we are so desperate because we are so dependent, is almost $150 billion per year. And $225 billion you can save merely by improving the logistic costs, which means also using inland waterways, also using river transportation, also using multimodal logistic parks. So it's a whole ecosystem, it's a world of its own. And when we say it's a world of its own,
Yes.
this maritime focus, it has to seep into our every decision.
Absolutely. And it hasn't happened overnight. There have been, Commodore Anil Jay saying, several policy interventions which have occurred. There have been there's been a lot of effort put in for this feat to be achieved. What has led to this policy change and, results on ground, and how do you hope this will be followed up with now as well?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think firstly, in the last few years, there's been a realization that the maritime domain is very important for India's future economic sustenance. And therefore, there's been a tremendous push towards building up this sector. In the last few years, we've seen shipbuilding policies emerging. As has come out from the other panelists, shipbuilding is not one of our strong suites at the moment. Forget about the warship building. I'm talking about merchant shipbuilding. Our shipbuilding was not competitive, so nobody wanted to buy our ships. So, of course, in ship recycling, which is basically what you wanted to ask about initially, Alang was always considered one of the world's leading ships recycling yards, ship breaking yards they were called at that time. But unfortunately, because it was more like a cottage industry at that time, there was very little attention paid to, environmental concerns, that's all, etc. So when regulations started coming in, obviously Alang suffered. But ever since the Ship Recycling Act in 2019 and the Hong Kong Convention came about, and there was an insistence that we must conform to those conventions, Alang has picked up again, and I think it's really quite remarkable that it's regained the top spot in the world, because ship recycling is a profitable business. But coming to overall the maritime domain, Uh, Over the years, there's been this very steady shift in the attention being given to the maritime domain. So if we take the Maritime Agenda 2010, 2020, it had set certain targets. Of course, while that program was still running in 2015, Project Sagarmala was introduced, which was alluded to earlier. But that was mainly to do with port-led development. But like has also come out, they're all interconnected. Then came the Maritime Vision 2020-2030, which is what is actually in currency now, and the target set in that has been exceeded by a long. And now we also have running parallel to that is the Maritime Amritkal Vision 2047. Now, Maritime Amritkal Vision 2047 is really the master plan because these 5-year and 7-year plans rarely achieve the targets, the ambitious targets that are set for the simple reason that shipbuilding, ship recycling, ship repair, anything to do with the shipping industry is a long lead time item. It's capital intensive. It takes time to build a shipyard. Once you build a shipyard, it takes time to get orders, etc. So if you're looking at 2047 with very specific milestones, and I think 2047 says that by 2047 we'll be one of the top 5 shipbuilders in the world. We'll be one of the top 3 ship recycling, ship repair countries in the world, and we'll be the top ship recycler in the world. So we already reached the ship recycler stage already, and we have to maintain this now over the next 20 odd years. But shipbuilding, what is happening now is a lot of support has been given. Prime Minister has given 80,000 crores to various aspects of shipbuilding. Because what was happening earlier was shipyards were coming up. There were private shipyards. There was Pipavav, there was Bharti, there was ABG. But they were not getting the right kind of subsidies from the government. The government wasn't holding their hand. And that's why they were losing out in the competition to China, Japan, and South Korea, who account for almost 95% of the global shipbuilding market even now. So one, of course, is that we have to break into that very exclusive club, which will take time. But the good thing again that has happened is that some of the private shipyards are being encouraged to look for foreign partners. In the last 1 year, most of the leading shipbuilders in the world, mainly the South Korean shipyards, have all visited Indian shipyards. They've come to Cochin shipyard, they've been to Pipavav shipyard, they've been to L&T shipyard. They've come and seen the capacities, they've come and seen the skill sets, and they're all willing to invest now and use Indian shipyards to meet their excess capacity. In fact, South Korea has promised to set up a greenfield shipyard in a place I think called Thotukil on the east coast near Chennai. They're planning to invest $4 billion in setting up that shipyard. Now, if we get that kind of support and that kind of incentivization and that kind of finance is available, then the shipbuilding industry will thrive. Because once you have that sort of initial financial capital, you can afford to give subsidies and all, which can over the long term get amortized into the shipbuilding costs. And therefore, we become competitive with the global market. I mean, at the moment, ships get built only if there are people placing an order for ships.
Absolutely.
And like somebody said earlier, it's a commercial business.
And if we look at Yogender, the entire market, it's about $165 to $175 billion, the total global shipbuilding market. So if we do expand our footprints, it will mean great success economically as well. How much does India stand to gain from our strides in the maritime domain for our GDP, for our economy? How important is this for India, economically speaking? Yogendra Kapoor.
Right, Uday. First of all, I would like to say that the relationship between ship recycling and shipbuilding is like that of a service provider vis-a-vis a product maker. So my point is that unless and until we have a long-term vision and the ability to take risk, we will not be able to contribute in the manner in which we should be contributing. As we can look at the statistics, India, in terms of shipbuilding, is contributing not even 1% of the, in terms of its share as such. So we already see that there is a great potential going forward. And now, what I am, clearly of the view is that it is here that the government, the industry, as well as the banks, they need to work as cohesive forces, because unless and until they don't support each other, we don't see the growth in the shipbuilding industry, which is the real crux, as I see. And the point is that, it's very important that the government needs to create a platform of giving tax incentives. The bank should be available to fund the projects, and the industry should be spending in research and development. And at the same time, should move into projects where they see that there is a great potential in terms of their share in the market. So I think the most important thing is that it is time, as one of the panelists rightly said, that even a country like South Korea is looking towards India, who themselves are one of the top shipbuilders in the world. So I think it is here that we have the time where we need to be, acting in a manner that we contribute to our greatest potential as such, and we don't let the time go by.
Okay, let me in fact quickly also now go back to Captain Karve. Captain Karve, now what needs to be the priority in the weeks and months ahead to further build on this feat that we have achieved, and also move forward in the rankings for shipbuilding as well? What
No,
need to be
like
the
the panelists
priority
have,
areas now?
yeah, like the previous panelists have brought out, the Indian vision for maritime industry for 2047 is very well laid out, and fortunately, we are following that path.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, there were only few dedicated shipbuilders from where you could build ships. Today, there are quite a few number of shipbuilders reputed. The private companies, major companies, have stepped into the shipbuilding arena, which actually is a very good sign for the nation per se. One, you have options available. Second, there is a competition. Third, being a private entity, they are more concerned about meeting the deadline, which a government organization to some extent is not really bothered about, to be very blunt. But a private entity is very careful when it comes to meeting the deadline and meeting the quality standards. So we are already on the path. What we need to do is sustain our movement, sustain the progress, and if we get any roadblock, the government needs to step in with subsidies or easing of regulations as required.
But why is this growth not happening in commercial shipbuilding? What we are seeing, of course, happened for the Navy. Commodore Anil Jay Singh, why is it not happening for commercial shipbuilding just yet?
Like has been brought out earlier, this is totally profit oriented. Therefore, it is not about whether you can build ships or not. You may be able to build ships, you may have the capacity to build ships, but if those ships are not affordable for the people who are looking to buy the ships, who are looking at it as a business, then they will not sell. And therefore, you find that then your capacity is not being utilized. So, and the biggest hurdle so far for Indian shipbuilding has been to be competitive in the global market. That is because, like I said earlier, we did not give adequate subsidy to our shipbuilding industry to compete with the subsidies being offered by the competitors in the global market, like the Chinese, the Japanese, and the South Koreans to their shipbuilding industry. So obviously, we found we could not be competitive. Secondly, we lack some certain areas. We do lack, like, for example, excellence in design. But now, as part of Sagarmala and part of the Maritime Vision, we are looking to set up centers of excellence in ship design. So unless we have our own design capability and build capability, we are not going to be able to compete. Now, so obviously, one of the major considerations is finance. Now, the other day I was reading a paper somebody written, and he said the biggest problem in ship financing is the fact that people look at this bankers, look at this industry with a lot of suspicion because of the previous track record. The problem is that this industry is unique in many ways. So what it needs is people who understand the shipping industry, to understand the finance mechanisms that are required to provide it the incentivization. It's not a routine loan being given by a bank to a company. Unfortunately, the people who are dealing with shipping companies in banks are fundamentally bankers and not shipping professionals. So we need that balance. We need to have some shipping professionals also who can explain to the banks the typical peculiarities of this industry, the typical sort of issues related to finance that would come up, the challenges that they're likely to face, and then find the right kind of model to be able to provide ship financing, because that is one of the biggest constraints that we face. The third thing is that, fortunately, we've now got the Amritkal Vision 2047, which is looking at a 20-year time frame. Otherwise, these 5 and 10-year plans, for example, I'll tell you, Maritime Vision 2010 to 2020, when in 2010, we had 0.05% of the global market. We were supposed to reach 5% by 2020. In 2020, we still had 0.05% of the global market, and we're going to reach 5% by 2030. Now we are at the end of 26, we are at 0.06% of the global market. So we are setting targets that are totally unrealistic, given the kind of environment. If we are wanting to set a target of 5%, where is the shipyard? Where are we creating that capacity? What are the incentive we are giving to reach that 5%? It's just a figure in a document. which nobody is making any effort to achieve. And so we are languishing at that 0.05, 0.06% for the last 20 years with targets of 5%, which we are nowhere near achieving. So we have to look at it in a very holistic manner. And that is where the government has now stepped in. The Prime Minister has personally monitoring shipbuilding in India today. And he has given this 80,000 crores basically for this purpose to ease the finance constraints that shipbuilding in India has faced. The second thing India must look at is what kind of ships do we want to build?
Yes.
Are we trying to compete with the Chinese and the Japanese and
Yeah.
the Koreans?
You know,
or are
and
we looking at
also this
niche technology?
increasing indigenization push for our naval vessels. Commander Diwan, how has that been a boost for our Navy as well? 30 seconds, I'm out of time.
Yeah. I want to tell you that besides the shipbuilding, very important element is about various key components, namely engines that marine equipment industry, propellers, pumps, navigation systems, electronics, cargo handling equipment. In each sector, there need to be players who can complete the supply chain, who can complete the full works. And so this is a complicated issue in the sense that it is not one-stop shop. And crux of the matter is like Chinese model, incentive, tax incentives, subsidies, and these things alone can take us forward, and skill development in these respective areas of shipbuilding can take us forward.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us with your perspectives on this big story. We're taking a short break, much more coming up.